Okay, good afternoon everyone on this unusually sunny afternoon in Sheffield. Welcome to the Housing Committee. Today, 20th of March 2025. We've got most of our committee here, so we'll do introductions in a moment. Can I just give people the usual reminders about turning their phones off or onto silent? I think people in the room will know where the toilets and fire exits are. If not, then ask someone who looks as though they do know what they're doing. And I think we'll go through it. We'll go into introductions in a moment. I just want to say, of course, you'll see it's a fairly packed agenda. There are things on there that we've been able to discuss in briefings which have been really, really useful beforehand. And so I'm hoping we can get through that. But I'm just mindful of the amount of important items that we have to make decisions on this afternoon, so that we go and do that. We'll just go around and do introductions. So I will start on the left as usual, and I'll just ask people to go around of the committee in order.
Councillor Alan Woodcock for East Ecclesfield Ward.
Hi, Councillor Penny Baker for Stannington Ward and Vice Chair. Thank you.
Paul Turpin, Green Councillor for Gleaders Valley.
Good afternoon, I'm Mike Chaplin. I'm a Labour Councillor for Southey Ward.
Mia Drazik, Councillor for Park and Aberthorn.
Alison Norris, Councillor for Woodhouse and Labour spokesperson for housing.
Councillor Mark Jones, Burngreave Ward. Thank you. And in case I forgot my own name, Douglas Johnson, representing City Ward, and I'm chair of this committee. So we've got apologies from Councillor Richard Williams today. So I think we've got those noted. Everyone else is here, so we can't have any other apologies. So thanks very much. I should have asked officers to introduce themselves too. So we do the usual thing of the officers who are at the desks to introduce themselves, and then when other officers come up to present items, just have to give your full name and job title at the time. But I'll start over here. Sherry.
Good afternoon, it's Sherry Grant, Assistant Director, Legal Services.
Joanne Cooper, Democratic Services, covering for Amanda.
Good afternoon, Ashman Ali, Executive Director of Neighbourhood Services.
Hi, Chris Ellison, Interim Director of Housing.
Right, thank you everyone. Let's crack on with the busy agenda. So item 2 we can deal with quickly. I don't think there's any items to exclude the press. 3, declarations of interest. Does anyone want to declare anything? Don't see anything, wasn't expecting. Okay. So number 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting, which people will find at page 11 of the agenda. I just want to check that they're recorded as an accurate record, first of all. Actually, Councillor Norris, I just wondered if you could just check what your comments were on page 11, the point about decarbonisation, 49.1.2. Did you want to comment on that, whether that's accurate, or it's just that you raised it, so I thought it's only fair to bring that up, just because we will have to deal with the item on the work plan. That's fine, right, okay. So anyone's got any comments on the minutes? Can I have those accepted as a true record? Everyone happy with that? Right, so I think we've got unanimous agreement to that. That's it, thank you very much. And then on item 5, we've got public questions, etc., and we don't have any public questions, statements, petitions, or questions. So we move on to item 6, which is members' questions. So I think everyone's had this circulated. We do have one member's question. It's from Councillor Williams. It's on the subject of defibrillators, and it's the paper I don't have in front of me, but it has been published on the website. So it's the question asking about whether defibrillators are fitted in our sheltered schemes. There are 4 4 either fitted or to be fitted fairly soon. I think we've got a supplementary question, which I've agreed Councillor Baker can ask on behalf of Councillor Williams. So I'll let you ask your supplementary question.
Thank you, Chair. The question is simply, are there any plans to extend this provision to the other sites? Thank you.
Thank you. And by the other sites, I think you referred to about 31 possible sites, aren't there? So I'll invite the Director to step in and comment on that. Well, I'll ask you to step in.
Thank you. I'm not aware of any, but that doesn't mean there aren't any, so we'll consult with health colleagues and come back to you.
Just to say, Chair, through you, if I may, I do know there are various pots of money that people can bid into to get them. All sorts of different ones now. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a reasonable question, and of course it is something that a number of voluntary groups and businesses actually want to fund. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on to item 7. So this is the work programme. So I'm going to invite Joanne Cooper to step in a moment and just take us through this. So you'll find the papers on page 19 of the agenda pack, and then presumably starting over the page on page 22. Joanne, over to you.
I've just had an update from Amanda on changes that have been made to the work programme since the papers were published. She says flexible tenancies and the tenancy strategy update have moved from the June meeting to a date to be confirmed. The decarbonisation action plan has been added to the April meeting. A commissioning decision, which is the contract for the supply of kitchens, has also been added to the April meeting. The temporary accommodation strategy and temporary accommodation policy will be taken to the June meeting together as one item, and the leasehold management policy has been moved from June to September. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So just to clarify what I know about those, so those are largely to do with scheduling, office availability. The decarbonisation item is the item I mentioned with Councillor Norris, who'd flagged it up, so that's due to come onto our next meeting's agenda. And so I think, and those are in addition to the changes that are already listed in writing on page 22. And they all seem straightforward to me. Does anyone else have any comments, disagreements? Can I take that as a approval of those changes to the work plan? So thanks for the Leeds Corporation on that bit of scheduling there. Right, thanks very much. That's all approved. Okay, so now we can move on to the substantive items. So the first two items are the budget monitoring and then the performance monitoring. So first of all, ask Jean Wilby to come up, and so I'll ask you to introduce yourself once you settle down, even though you're probably the most familiar face because you have to provide this report at all these committees. And then we can just go through the budget monitoring, which for members is at page 29. And of course, if you're watching at home. So, Jane, would you like to introduce yourself and then take us briefly through the report? So assume that we have read it and that some people at home will have done too.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jane Wilby. I'm Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting, and the report presents the financial position for the Council for the third quarter of 24-25, which covers up until December 24 and a 3-month forecast position. So the outturn position is that of a 34.8 million overspend for the Council, which is 800,000 worse than the estimated position at the end of the second quarter. And that includes overspends of 11 million in adult social care, 16.2 million education, children and families, and a further 11 million supporting costs for those facing homelessness. So like many councils, we are grappling with significant financial challenges, including an increased demand for services, especially in social care, when we're seeing increased complexity of need and higher costs as a result, a surge in education, health and care plans that's had a knock-on impact on home-to-school transport, and a national shortage of suitable housing, which has caused a reliance on temporary accommodation. A 34 million overspend is not a comfortable position to be in, and whilst we're reporting a 93% delivery on our in-year savings plans, there's still a huge amount of work to be done to address that underlying position. So the Council will fund the overspend this year with the use of specific provision that's been set aside for the housing subsidy loss issue and the remainder of the budget contingency reserve. If overspends occur in 25-26, we will be using specific earmarked reserves that will be required to support services, and the Council will need to continually assess the reserves position to make sure it retains sufficient reserves to meet future risks. In response to this overspend, the finance colleagues have been working with service leaders in those key underperforming budgets to understand the drivers of the issues and develop targeted action plans to support financial recovery. There's also been some immediate measures put in place to reduce costs, which include recruitment review panel to ensure that staffing decisions are made with careful financial consideration and appropriate challenge. In the Housing Committee, the General Fund is overspent by 4.6 million, and this relates to expenditure on temporary accommodation that's not fully reimbursed by housing benefit. This year we expect the cost to be about 6.2 million, which is somewhat offset by the use of grants. The position did improve in the quarter by 600,000 as a direct result of the work happening in the service, which includes the Voids Improvement Project, which is working to turn around our vacant properties. Over the last year, the number of voids have been reduced by 300, and the project expects to deliver 25 empty properties back into use each month. There has been a change in our allocations policy, which has started to create more availability, and there has been significant operational improvement with a new triage system, which has reduced pressure on the service, which is helping to identify and prioritise prevention cases to minimise those B&B placements. The temporary accommodation strategy that will be presented today will provide further context and outline the ambition to end the use of B&Bs and nightly paid accommodation. There has been significant proactive steps by the service to take control of the situation, and they're working collaboratively with finance colleagues to move to a sustainable position. In the HRA, there's an overspend of 3.7 million against the business plan this year. We've had a higher than estimated income due to better collection rates of rent and a better interest income from our reserve balances and lower charges from a delay in borrowing. The upsides have helped offset some of those continued overspends in the repairs and maintenance service, including subcontractor costs, materials and agency overspends, which has been driven by the ageing stock and the general level of work needed. Some of the overspends being due to the work on the void jobs, but the work supporting that reduction in temporary accommodation as the homes become available to support those in need. The HRA has also benefited from additional rent from the turnaround of those vacant properties. The Council's response to the overall position is the Future Sheffield programme, which is our strategic approach to the council-wider change that will help us modernise and improve the way we work to deliver a balanced budget and capture some of those key challenges that we currently face. The Council set a balanced budget for 25-26, which was approved in March by full Council, and has looked to address some of the key budget areas of challenge as part of that allocation process this year, which has been guided by a priority-based budgeting approach. The local government finance settlement provided a higher than anticipated level of funding and provided for growth in core spending power above the national average, but it's still lower in real terms when we compare it to 2010 funding levels. So the report is to note the financial position at Q3 and to ask for continued support from members and officers to drive the budget delivery to keep the Council within resources and driving value for the taxpayers' money. So I'm happy to take any questions on that in-year financial position.
Thanks very much. As you say, it's not a comfortable position to have this degree of financial pressure right across the Council, including here, but you've described some of the really important works going on there. Questions from Councillor Jones first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, Jane. How much would, say, a 1-point reduction in interest rates affect our revenue from savings? I think Bank of England made the choice to leave them as they are for now, but going forward, what mitigations are we expecting to have to put into place for loss of that additional revenue stream?
So the way that we budget for our capital financing has to be quite, prudent. You'll probably remember when you've seen me come back in previous years talking about windfalls that we've had from Treasury Management Strategy, where we did see a spike in interest rates, which obviously means if we're holding strong cash balances, we do benefit from that. So we do have a strategy in place which kind of takes account of where the expectations in interest is going to go. If I could predict that, then clearly, I'd be a lot better off than I am now. But I think what I'm saying with that, this year we have had sort of increases in income from interest rates, and that's mainly due to the fact that we have quite a prudent estimate, but it is built into the budget. Some of the additional interest that we've seen this year, again, it's been and we've benefited through delaying our borrowing against our capital programme for housing. So because of the programme slipped, we've had less borrowing as well. So that's all kind of played into it. So I wouldn't like to particularly nail down the sensitivity on a 1% margin right here in this meeting, but it's certainly something that we do look at and actively manage as part of our treasury management strategy.
Right, thanks, Rich. Councillor Norris, you've got a question.
Thanks. It was on 3.19 on page 43. Delays on borrowing because we've got a delayed need for borrowing to finance the housing capital programme. Presumably that's because capital work we need to do has been delayed. And I was just checking if, as far as I understand it, those delays are, we're progressing that work now, but I just wanted to check, have I understood right, and are we progressing it?
Yeah, so I think it's similar to the point I was just kind of making, that in terms of where we set the treasury management budget and then the budget and the HRA, obviously we do that a year in advance, and then the capital programme, where we are with the delivery of the capital programme, you know, influences where we are with the borrowing. If we delay in our capital borrowing, or we've got overall additional cash, we might decide to internally borrow and not externalise that borrowing, depending on prevailing market rates, what other risk we have, where the liquidity is, etc. So overall, all those things in balance kind of contribute to the underlying position. So we've benefited this year because of a slippage in the programme, and we've not needed to borrow as much.
And that's what I was concerned about, which I'm not sure is a question for you or a question for Chris.
Probably a question for Chris.
Is the slippage, is it slipping still, or is it stopping slipping, if that makes sense?
I was actually looking at for a year. I should remember, shouldn't I? Apologies. I was actually looking at the report this morning. There is still some slippage. It's not hugely material, and some of it will carry forward, and some of that is around slippage on new developments and acquisitions, which happens because of delays for a variety of reasons. But yes, there is still some, but it will flow through. It's not material enough for it to be a concern, but it's something we pay attention to on a monthly basis.
That's okay. Thanks very much, both of you. So I guess that, I guess that we've got the issues like slippage, where it's the same money at a different time space. We've got matters like interest rates that are firmly outside the control of the council, and then we've got the matters that are inside. And of course, we've got the temporary accommodation strategy on this agenda, and as you know, we've actually had a lot of work focusing on the performance in the repairs service. We've got the performance monitoring report next, and on work-line voids, etc. So probably keen to move on a bit, but Councillor Jones, do you want to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully this will be quite a brief one. It's been on my mind that we've had to make some significant interventions to try and drive forward the housing stock and everything else. And I'm kind of thinking, when we undertake large capital programmes, such as replacement of roofs at large amounts of our properties, there's an element in here about using contractors and the cost that that's had on us. And I'm kind of wondering, those big interventions, though needed, do they disrupt the market, and not just of labour, but also delivery of materials that wind up driving costs up? So is there a better way, and if that is the case, is there a better way of managing those continual renewals programmes going forward, so we can sort of manage some of those cost inflationary elements in there, if that makes any sense?
It does, I think, Councillor. Let's see if my answer matches the question, and then you'll know if it did make any sense. Depending on local activity and regional activity, yes, you can disrupt the market by going out to large-scale procurements. Generally, what you would do is test that market before you did that, and take that into consideration. And it is very unpredictable, and it's down to a series of both economic and political factors, but also local factors in terms of what the council down the road might choose to do at the same time as you. So it is hard to say one way or the other what the impacts will be. what you are considering later is an interim asset management strategy. And as part of that fuller asset management strategy, which will come back to the council in a year's time, is about planning that activity differently and more proactively. And within that, then considering how you would deliver that, how much of that would be internal and how much that might be through contracting. And if you're going to go to contracting, what is the best way to go to that market to contract, when to do it? So I think that asset management strategy brings in a much more proactive and considered forward-looking approach, which is what it's designed to do, and colleagues will talk about it more later.
Thank you. That's helpful. All right, okay. Just before we move on, I'll just go and draw people's attention to this, because no one's mentioned it yet. It's on page 42, but it's drawing attention to the fact that the number of voids, open void jobs, so empty homes, and reducing from 430 at the beginning of the year to 318. So that's an improvement of 112, and that means 112 properties that are now housing people and where they're paying rent, and the council isn't shelling out for council tax on empty homes, and that's one of the outcomes there. So we're just being asked to note this for today, kind of approval for noting that, and then if so, we'll move on to the performance monitoring. Thank you very much, Jane, for your presentation. So we'll now move on to the next monitoring report, so performance monitoring on item 9. Chris, you're coming in on that, so should we get everyone to go to page 47 of the papers, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And I took my cue to switch the mic on that time. As noted, I'm presenting the Housing Repairs Performance paper for Q3 of this financial year. It's part of the committee's remit to regularly monitor the performance data for the Council's Housing Repairs Service. And the performance covered by this paper is designed to inform the committee of how housing and repair services are performing, the contributions they're making to the council's plans, and importantly, the impact they're having on the residents of Sheffield. So members will note that there is a focus on tenant satisfaction measures, and there's a reason for this, because these come directly from our residents and are a result of independently collected data. The measures themselves originate from a national survey and consultation exercise of social housing residents across the country, including leaseholders and supported housing residents, which is undertaken by the regulator for social housing, and these were deemed to be the measures that made the biggest difference to those residents. So this is why we focus on these measures now, and they form also the basis for the regulator's consumer standard, for which all social housing landlords are addressed. And because of that, that means there are over 500,000 residents who are now completing these surveys and contributing to the establishment of the benchmarking data, which you'll see in some of the reports. So if you look at the performance for Q3 and how it compares, if you could put the slides up, please. I have a couple of slides here just to try and illustrate. And they're on a cycle, so almost certainly what will happen is the moment I'm talking to the slide I want to be talking to, it'll change to the next slide, and vice versa. But we'll go with it, and eventually members will be able to absorb the data. So I've drawn out those key tenant satisfaction measures. There's a lot more data available in the report, but this shows that there is a positive trend on the previous quarter, and all but one measure now is above target and into the medium benchmark. The area that isn't in that medium benchmark yet is communal areas, and members can see later on in the report that there's an area of focus for the neighbourhood service, and there are a number of projects underway to improve this, alongside the stock condition work, which is referenced in the asset management strategy later on in your agenda. I'll go on, change right at the right time. There we go. What you'll also see is that there is a continuation of a positive trend over the past year, where you'll be able to see from this slide that over the last year, performance measures have improved by 3 to 9 percentage points across the board. So I think what I'm trying to say here, this is consistently improving. It's a direct result of some of the interventions that we've brought to you and talked to you about in this committee, and does make a difference to those tenants. You can access this data on a monthly basis, and it's available to all members of the public as well via the council website, and that's to ensure that we continue with that level of transparency. So the data and the feedback we get from our tenants is telling us that the communication we have with them is continuing to improve. And when they contact us, they especially feel we treat them fairly and with respect. And you'll see that this is consistently one of the highest performing measures that we have in that, and obviously very important to our residents. Having said all that, and having put that information on the screen, there's a continued recognition that we need to continue that improvement journey across all of our housing and repair services for the benefit of the residents of Sheffield. And I'll touch on a few things that we're doing in just a minute. But before I do, I just want to briefly draw out the continuing focus on health and safety across both the homes we own, but also those that are owned by others and or in the private sector. The data in your report shows further improvements in performance across these broad ranges of measures, including we have fire and electrical safety right through to Legionella and asbestos safety. One of the areas we have to continue to have an enhanced focus on is on our gas checks in Sheffield homes. And whilst improvement plans to date have delivered the level of performance we've got now, we've just put in place a series of further measures to ensure that the improvement gets us to where we need to be in this area. It's all part of our ongoing continued focus in health and safety, and there are a wide range of measures in our improvement plans that will address these areas and ensure continuous improvement in the future, ranging from changes in national policy and legislations, which is also coming down the line and we need to address. In terms of our homeless and associated services, in this quarter we've implemented a wide-ranging improvement plan to ensure the residents of Sheffield who need a home the most are firstly able to stay in the home that they are in now, if it is appropriate to do so, and if not, get a different appropriate permanent home in the shortest possible time with a minimum use of temporary accommodation or B&B. This is especially true for the families of Sheffield, who are the last people we want to see in that type of accommodation. And you'll note, again, later on in your agenda, you've got a paper on temporary accommodation, which addresses this further. Also, as part of these measures in the improvement plan, we are currently consulting on the council's allocation policy. So I would urge people to take part in that. It's been very successful, just launched this week, and we've already had more than 600 responses. So if you haven't done already, please have a look and please take part on that. So a little bit more on those other areas of service improvement underway. In our repairs service, we are recruiting more of the right skilled staff. Yesterday, I had the privilege of going to the depot and meeting some of those people, and they had recently completed their apprenticeships with the council, and there is a steady flow of homegrown talent yet to come through there, so that's a really positive sign for everybody and a benefit ranging from the individuals in that service to the individuals receiving that service. We've also engaged one of the sector's leading experts to ensure that our damp and mould service is as effective as possible, including preventative measures, and that we deal with any disrepair in a timely manner. Obviously, we are acutely aware of the impact that has on residents. There are a series of customer and service delivery pilots underway in repairs to improve the efficiency and quality of the service, and this will ultimately help reduce the waiting time for the service. In our neighbourhoods, we are piloting a localised tenant bulletin to promote local issues and address local issues. And to help with the communal estate issues that you saw in those performance information and that our residents are telling us about, we've set funds aside to target neighbourhood improvement schemes and are using the tenant survey data and feedback to focus on communal cleaning aspects that make the biggest difference to the residents of that estate. And all of this will now be monitored by our new neighbourhood resident mystery shoppers, which we're really pleased to have on board, and thank them for the time that they give up to do that. So we will continue to strive to improve and transform for the benefit of the residents. And on that note, I would ask the committee to note this report and raise any questions or points as they see fit.
Thank you very much. That's really good to see those figures on the screen there. Any immediate questions from the committee? And we've largely got what we have here. Okay, we have got some questions. Okay, go to Councillor Turpin first.
Great, thanks. So a couple of things. Firstly, where is that document? Where can that document be found? Because it's not in the report. Okay. So a couple of questions on the data that is in the report. Is the percentage of homes that do not meet the Decent Homes standard has gone up steadily through the year. So I wonder if you can just explain why that is, or if that's just something to do with the stock survey that we're discovering more, or how that number is increasing.
Yes, I think if the committee remembers when we brought the request of the stock condition survey to them, we noted that that was a significant change and improvement in the data that we held on the stock. So that has and will continue to impact on that decency figure. Obviously, homes fall in decency in terms of the requirements that they need to keep them decent and come out of decency continuously. So that is a variable figure, and will always be a variable figure. But I think the material impact comes through the stock condition surveys.
Okay. So on that then, as there's been quite a few thousand surveys done already, is there any idea of, can you project that data forward based on the averages so far, how high that will rise by the time the survey is complete next year?
I don't think you could predict that for a number of reasons. Obviously, each property varies. The properties we targeted first were the areas that we thought needed the most work and potentially needed the most decency work, and therefore that would skew the figure. But what it does do, and when we do collect that data, it enables us to focus and target those properties first to make those improvements. But where that failure might be down to an HHSRS failure, so a housing health and safety rating failure, if it's a category 1 failure, that failure gets addressed immediately within the week. So it gets flagged to us, and where we can, we'll address it in the week. So so some of those are getting flagged, and we are addressing them, and then they'll get re-inspected, and that'll change the decency level.
We'll just keep an eye on that then, I guess, in the next period of time. Can I also ask you then about the electrical safety and gas safety certificates? Because I know that we're trying to tackle that a while back and procured contracts with electrical contractors to do the electrical certificates. And you'll have to remind me, did we contract someone else to do the gas safety certificates? Because there was certainly stuff went into the new housing contract regarding access, but neither of the figures seem to have improved.
Oh, turn myself off again. So in terms of gas, we didn't procure externally. We were using some subcontractors in that area. What we've done is focused on recruiting more of our own gas engineers to do that work. We did quite an in-depth improvement plan on that. That took us to that figure that we're at, or got to in that Q3 that you can see. And since then, we've just recently put in a further improvement plan, which is designed to close that last resistant gap of just under 200 down to the figure. I mean, ultimately, we'd like to get down to 0, but down to a much more acceptable figure. So with gas, it's been a combination of factors. We've just seen some recent success over the last month by some of our fitters and engineers going out on Saturday mornings and in the evenings, and that has produced a number of successful results. Where previously those were part of those 200 that we were having difficulty accessing, we are getting into about 40% of those that we go and see. So that's just one of those measures, but there's a whole series of other measures we've just put in place, including re-engineering the process, changing the letters, and so on, just to again try and nudge that figure down to where we want it to be. So yeah, I looked down at my notes when there's one more thing. So electrical, yeah, those two are outsourced contracts. They've started recently, October, and are delivering those results. And we expect to have all of those homes that have over 10 years back into compliance by June this year.
Okay, so sorry, just one follow up.
Yeah, it's got some more people waiting.
Sure,
but yeah, one more.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Okay, so we'll wait for Q4 to see an improvement in the electrical safety certificates.
Indeed.
I just want to ask as well, with this stubborn 200 or so homes without a gas safety certificate, what provision has the council made for the impact of gas leaks or, God forbid, explosions?
So all of those homes are continuously risk assessed in terms of the nature of where they are, who lives in them, whether they are indeed occupied, and that's what we've discovered with a number of those targeted approaches that we've been taking out. And I said, we've got 40% access. Well, actually, there was a significant number of those that showed evidence that there was nobody living in the property, and therefore we can take a different form of action with those. So they are continuously risk assessed.
Thanks very much. That will get some really useful questions there. Just picking up the first point, I just wonder if we could get these slides added to the website for this meeting, if everyone's in agreement with that. I'm sure we'll try and consult that out. But thanks very much. Okay. Got some more questions. Councillor Chaplin, would you like to ask next?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chris, for this report. My questions are on the tenant satisfaction survey, and it is pleasing to see that a lot of those indicators are going in the right direction. But I did wonder, probably our best figure is on tenants being treated with dignity and respect. And I just wondered if there'd been a breakdown as to whether that's the responses are in relation to face-to-face communications or in relation to telephone conversations.
I don't know is the answer to that question. These surveys are undertaken independently by telephone, but the resident might refer to a face-to-face interaction. So I don't know, but we can look into that further. I think it might, like all data, the first number is not the number you want to know. It's what sits beneath that that's really important. So you raise a good point.
Yeah, and I did it purposely because being a councillor for a ward which has a lot of council housing stock, I often find it's where tenants have reported repairs through the helpline and they've either been misunderstood or they felt they'd been fobbed off, and I wondered whether that had led them to feel that they were treated with less respect. I mean, overall the figures are pretty good, and we know that not all of our tenants are having good days all of the time, which may also be an influence on them, which is why I think we do need to treat all these figures with some degree of, not scepticism, but accept that there might be a bit of leeway on them, depending on external factors. So coming to the one box on there which is showing up as orange instead of green, relates to communal cleaning areas. And again, from experience, and I can see Councillor Baker nodding, it only takes one tenant in a block of flats to treat the communal areas with disrespect and litter it and leave a lot of, well, we'll call it litter out of politeness in the area, but it basically then ruins it for the other tenants who are understandably complaining to us when they can't get any joy from housing officers, because understandably we've got contracts and we can't expect our contractors to go back every 5 minutes to go and do a clean-up. I mean, in my area, I think it's around the 13th, once every 13 weeks, the areas get cleaned, which if everyone is behaving themselves, it's not going to be a problem. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on what could be done to to improve on that and get our figures back into the green on that one. And lastly, we've got quite a low target for the approach to handling complaints. That's down at 34%. It's in green because it's going in the right direction, but it's the lowest of that block of 12 there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So on communal areas, there are, I think, two major contributing factors. One is general cleanliness and appearance of the area, and the other is how well maintained that area is. And one impacts on the other, but they are slightly different things. And I think you'll see in the report, and I highlighted it in my commentary, there are a number of things we're doing to target the cleaning of the areas, and that's very much based on resident feedback, and residents will be mystery shopping and checking those areas. And we do change the level of the cleaning regime depending on the nature of the building, the wear and tear that it has, its requirements. So, as you rightly say, in some areas it might be 13 weeks. In other words, it might be twice a week. There are then the area that sits immediately outside of that block, which is often grass or vegetation, and again, how well we're able to maintain that, and that is, fundamentally a council service, has an impact. And finally, it's that general maintenance of the areas, and members will be aware that a lot of our homes are in small estate blocks, which have, communal areas, communal walkways, and those are areas where, in the past, when we've had limited investment opportunities and funds, we haven't focused on. We focused on the homes, and therefore they have slipped behind. So therefore, those are the areas that we asked, particularly in those stock condition surveys that Councillor Turpin referenced earlier in his question, that we've asked the surveyors to look at and see what we can do and what that investment is required in those areas. So it's never quite one single thing. It can be one single thing or one single person that can throw it out completely, but that's why it needs that sort of multi-layered approach. Complaints. Yes, now, unfortunately, the complaints target is low because nationally the median for that is low. So it's an area that all social housing providers have struggled in. It's an area that the Housing Ombudsman has been very clear over the last couple of years that social housing providers, whether they be housing associations or local authorities, have not performed well enough in, and it's an area that we're looking to continue to do better in. But it's as you quite rightly say, it's a low bar. The targets are set, and were set last year at the next quartile above where we were currently sitting at that end of year, and will be this coming year, and there'll be a review by members about those targets. So we will be pushing that target up next year. But it might not go very far because the national bar is quite low, as I say.
Thanks very much. Does that satisfy you? If so, we're going to Councillor Dressick.
Thanks, Chair. It's good to see the antisocial behaviour reports are going down. However, slightly fewer respondents this quarter are satisfied with the landlord's approach to handling the reports. I understand we're still above the target for satisfaction, but what can we do to improve the tenant's experience when resolving antisocial behaviour issues?
I think the council's hit the nail on the head. It is, very much the experience of individuals and the expectations of them, and whether we actually in a position to meet those expectations. And I think antisocial behaviour complaints and reports vary so much. They are very personal to the individuals involved. Very often and I'm sure members will be aware of this, we have one complaint about one resident and then the other complaint about the same resident. So, and I think, in my experience, what's happened over in recent years is that there is a greater expectation on residents in social housing for the landlord to resolve the issue for them, rather than seeking resolution with their own neighbours in their own way. And there are lots of theories and suggestions of why that may be. And we do try and encourage people to resolve things themselves. But I think it is about that experience. So often it is about being ensuring residents feel heard, that we make them very aware very early on what our limitations are. And I think my experience in terms of customer experience and antisocial behaviour, we try and help almost too much, and then when we can't do any more because it's outside of our powers and limitations, then residents feel let down because we could have told them that in the beginning. So I think it's been really clear about what we can and what we can't do.
Thanks very much. Yeah, good questions there. Councillor Jones, did you have a question too?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Chris. Like Paul, I think the decent home standards data isn't necessarily something we're particularly proud of, but we are asking more stringent questions and we're looking at that, so I'm pleased to see that we're not complacent and we're not avoiding the issue to actually see what we can do to address it. And the slides there, I particularly like the fact that we've got information on there as to what it was like previous years. I think we've requested that as a committee before, so we can kind of get a snapshot. In terms of the stuff we've got here, this may be my ignorance from not being on this committee last year. Looking at the calls and the time taken to answer the calls per quarter, I don't know whether the rise in quarter three, is it? Yeah, quarter three is a seasonal thing, or whether that's a pattern that occurs every year. Is it bad weather that's driving the call complaints and taking longer for them to answer? Is that something we see each year? And if so, is there something we can do to increase the amount of staffing on those lines to try and limit those waiting times and therefore drive up the number of calls actually taken? I'm not quite sure what the wider picture is on that. If you could highlight that, that'd be great.
Again, very good question. And it's a key area of focus in the Future Sheffield programme in terms of the customer experience work stream, and that's my colleague Tom Smith. But to try and answer your question, a number of things drive waiting times. Weather is definitely one of them, but our experience with bad weather was rain was in end of quarter three, snow and ice was beginning of quarter four. So there'll be a correlation there. But there are other seasonal factors as well. School holidays make a difference. Mondays is always the busiest day. There's a lot of different factors. We have recently increased the resource in that contact centre to improve call answering. But one of the biggest drivers we're looking at the moment is technology and using other ways for customers and residents to access services other than just the telephone. So being able to report repairs or issues themselves directly through the website or through other digitalised formats. That's still in its very early stages, but that's a big focus of the customer experience work stream. The largest single volume of calls to the contact centre is repairs, so that's 40% of all calls received. And one of the things they've introduced there recently is an automated system to register repair via the phone. So, but that's in its infancy weeks. So, and that will take some tailoring. So there's lots of different things we're doing, but we recognise that has to be the focus for the council in terms of its customer experience.
Thanks very much. Great. Not seeing any other questions there. So, yes, I am seeing one. Councillor Norris.
It's just on page, I'm not doing it now. Page 69 about complaints handling. The stage 1 complaints, the number that's being responded to within the time scale that we should respond has gone up, which is great. But the stage 2 complaints, it's still only 25%. What's the difference and what can we do about that?
I think it's fair to say that they're handled by different people. Stage 1 complaints often handled directly by the person who was involved in that service delivery. When it gets to stage 2, it's handled by somebody more senior, so they have to do more investigation work. And of course, when it gets to stage 2, it's usually got more complicated. Something hasn't gone right. We haven't resolved that issue in the first place, so it takes a bit longer. But we think this is an area that should be the one that we focus most on in terms of improving that stage 2 response times. And there are lots of things we're talking about at the moment that can do that. But we've got one of the major ones that's running at the moment is we've got an awareness and training campaign for people, and particularly for managers, in terms of responding to those stage 2 complaints.
Thanks very much. I guess on that page, the context is the number of complaints overall that's falling, and but the complexity of the complex ones is still the same. Okay, don't see any other hands. It's a very informative report. There's some good news in there, not out of the woods yet. For the recommendation, we really just asked to note this. It's on page 48, so it's just to note the performance report update for Q3. And then I think we can delete paragraph 2 because we've done that. Is everyone happy to note that and move on to the temporary accommodation strategy? So that's the next thing. So I think we've got Danielle and Suzanne coming up to the desk. So it's temporary accommodation strategy and policy. And we're going to page 75 in the papers. So would you like to just introduce yourselves by name and job title and find the right card in that pile of them there? And yeah, then introduce the report. I appreciate the report's quite substantial, and it's got both the strategy and the policy appended to it, and the appendices to the appendices. But that's only to go through it in immense detail, just the key headline points, really. So over to you.
Danielle Simonai, I'm a strategic housing officer and I work in Suzanne's service. So, do you want to introduce yourself or?
Yeah, hi, I'm Suzanne Allen, Head of Citywide Housing Services.
So as you said, it's quite a lengthy report, so I'll just do a quick summary. So I'm here to discuss the TA strategy and policy, which we're recommending that you all endorse for consultation. So the draft strategy is needed as we don't currently have the right provision in the city. We don't currently have a strategy or policy on this, so we really do need to get one in place. It means that we are currently over-reliant on bed and breakfast and other nightly paid provision. I think we've brought reports before, haven't we, on this? So we need the strategy to provide both a short-term initial solution to eliminate the reliance on that bed and breakfast, and also to provide a longer-term plan for provision in the city. And the accompanying policy is needed so that we can ensure that we're allocating those new properties in a fair and transparent manner. We've undertaken significant work to develop these drafts, building on previous consultation as part of the homelessness prevention strategy. We've also done a lot of benchmarking with other local authorities, particularly core cities, to understand that the initiatives that we're suggesting are achievable. We've also incorporated comments from senior officers, and councillors via the leading process to committee. And these key documents and action plan will form part of the wider improvement programmes that we've been talking about earlier on today. The consultation will last for 3 weeks if it's approved, and it'd close on the 14th of April, hopefully go live on Monday.
Thanks very much. That's great. I think it's your first report to the committee formally, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So you can probably tell I'm a bit nervous.
No, that's fine. Thanks for a concise summary there. Suzanne, anything to add to what Danielle said?
No, I'm assuming that people have had a chance to read the pack. As you said, it is quite extensive, but very happy to answer any questions.
Right, thank you. Well, we'll take any questions now. And as you note, informally, members have been through this and have had sight of early drafts, and we've got some comments in. So any questions from anyone here? We do. Councillor Turpin.
I was trying to wait and see if someone wanted to go first this time, but it might just be Alison. Thanks very much, and you didn't come across as nervous at all. So I've just got a question on a couple of things. I guess I have to keep reminding myself, this is about going to a consultation, and we've had some good conversations about the draft strategy. And I feel like there'll be another opportunity for us to really delve into that. So I'll hold back on some of my thoughts until then. So just a couple of things that I want to ask you about them. One is about the disproportionate impact on global majority people. And I was looking at the equality impact assessment, and it acknowledges that it's what are they calling it? Highlighted that some ethnic minority groups were overrepresented within the cohort. The strategy will improve the experience for everyone who needs temporary accommodation and will therefore have a positive impact on this group. I'm not really satisfied with that. So how is that group going to be overrepresented in the consultation? You know, when there's obviously cultural and language barriers, and also I'm trying to avoid saying difficult to reach, but I can't think of another phrase that means that.
Thanks. I think it's a very perceptive question. So, yeah, how to reach the people that someone's described as hard to reach. That's because we find it hard to reach them rather than anything else. Consultation, yeah. How do we get to the people we need to be hearing from?
Yeah. So we've got quite an extensive sort of methods of consultation planned. We've got an online survey, which will be circulated to everyone that's in temporary accommodation, but we're also working really closely with the Changing Futures co-production team. So they're going to help us do some of the more in-person consultations. So they'll be on site at some of our schemes and some of the bed and breakfasts. So they'll hopefully be able to capture those sort of more in-depth conversations and have that more sort of detailed discussions, really. Jump in, sorry.
And as well as that, where we are, as Danielle was saying, we are going to specifically look for feedback from people who've got lived experience of being in temporary accommodation, because we think that is really, really important. But we've also acknowledged that during previous consultation on the housing strategy, for example, that we've had underrepresentation from some of our communities that are more impacted by things like homelessness. So we have a very proactive consultation plan that is inclusive. We've been working with our equalities team and other organisations in the city who have got credibility, who are based in communities and can help us to do that outreach. We'll also be working with the local area committees and where it's appropriate and people can help. But really important that we're talking to voluntary sector organisations, community-based organisations, faith-based organisations, as well as others that have got expertise in diversity and equalities.
Okay, well, I guess that's hopeful, and I guess the proof of that will be in the results of the consultation, of how impactful that will be. You know, because of course everybody's story is different, and it would be good to see the same over-representation, the same ratio of those people in the consultation as those who are homeless. Yeah. So I just want to ask another question, because there's something. So it's the bit regarding Campbell Tickle, the critical friend. And it says part of their bullet points is that the service was overwhelmed by demand, with staff having higher caseloads than best practice would advise, and insufficient prevention activity, and cases not managed consistently. And so this says to me that the service is not fully resourced, and I'm just wondering. There's currently an acquisition of some new build houses that are basically going to help 6 households get onto the housing ladder through shared ownership. It's over £2 million to help 6 families get on the property ladder, which seems atrocious to me, given what we can see here. And so I just wonder, and I'm sorry if this is just outside of your area, Suzanne, but it strikes me that a much more impactful use of that money, or some of that money, would be to help resource the service to deal with those points.
So I don't really want to comment on the stock increase programme at this point, but Ajman or Chris might want to come in on that. But I did want to just comment on, if it's open. Sorry, did you want me to respond now? Sorry,
yes, please do.
I didn't ask your agreement for that. There is a lot of information in the Campbell Tickell review about staffing, use of staffing resources, and about making sure those staff are supported to do their job as well as they can, because it's a really tough job and people work very, very hard and very motivated to deliver. What they have found, and we're not unusual, is that when the new duties and powers came in under the Homeless Reduction Act, we didn't fully change our operating model to deliver on those wider duties at a time when we've got lots of pressures in public services, so we weren't alone in that. Added to that, there has been an increase in demand, which means we need to work with more people for longer. So what they have said is that we should look at how we deploy the current staffing resources in the first instance to make sure that we are making sure they are doing things that are adding the most value and they're not doing things that aren't, but also they get a really good training and support and workforce development programme. They have then said we should be looking at our overall resources and say, once we put in place those measures, what is the requirement going forward on staffing? There's lots of issues there, but the idea really is that if you do that earlier prevention work, which is intensive as well, it isn't easy, you're actually going to get a better outcome for that customer earlier, and you won't incur as much cost or work within the system. So it isn't a straightforward answer, Paul. I've managed home services for a long time and we have had reductions in staffing, but there are other things that we are doing within the wider Sheffield Futures, or Future Sheffield programme, sorry, I always get it confused with the old youth service name, to improve the customer experience, to make better use of things like technologies, to make better use of self-service, to join up all of those services more effectively. So there isn't only efficiency within a housing service, but within care services and housing, community support services. So I think there is a wider issue about, are we operating in the best way overall? But that doesn't mean there aren't going to be continuing challenges for staff.
Thanks very much. So that answers the question, okay? I mean, I think it... Chris, did you want to come in with anything else?
Only if it's useful, Chair, in terms of the nature of where the council puts its investments and how it addresses its homelessness issue and general demand for housing and affordable housing exceeding supply. I think the useful thing to note is that it's a very complex system in terms of that homelessness and allocations and in terms of managing and building new homes, and they're all related, and it's not ever one single answer, and it's understanding how that complex system fits together whilst being subject to unpredictable demands, which are with a sense of other factors that are outside your control. So that's an appreciation I'm trying to create there. So one of the things that Campbell Tickell helped us with is understanding of how the complex chains that exist within social housing and allocations can benefit the movement of people through those chains, and that actually when you get more sophisticated at it, the authority can put some of those chains together. What am I talking about? Well, if you take a home built for purchase, then actually if that purchase is made by somebody who's currently in social housing, then that frees up that home. That home might not be the home that the person in temporary accommodation or in housing needs, but it might be the home for the person who's blocking the home for the person that needs that home. Do you get what I mean? So you actually string together very long chains, and the most important thing when you're trying to address homelessness and allocations is to create that movement and keep that movement going. What you don't want is people in the wrong accommodation inappropriately broccoli it up. So you don't want people in temporary accommodation for long periods of time because they can't get in to their own property. You don't want people in supported housing who no longer need that support. You don't want people in older people's housing who need a care home. The movement's really important, and creating that movement is just a series of factors. So the housing strategy creates, which this committee obviously approved, is designed there to help everybody try and address those issues and through that complex system and focus priorities effectively, which is, I think, was the nature of your question.
So I appreciate you trying to make that explanation in an understandable way. So will those 6 £380,000 homes that will help 6 households get on the housing ladder, will they be only for people who are currently in council housing?
I don't know the details about that particular scheme. I wouldn't have thought so if they're open market.
So in which case it won't free up any council housing?
Well, not necessarily, because that private chain is also complicated, and that private chain may involve at the bottom of it a 2-bedroom flat that might somebody in council housing who's in the 2-bed who might be moving into that 3-bed that's freed up, that the people in the 3-bed are moving into the private accommodation. That's why it gets understanding that system and trying to impact it and change it is where it's really useful but quite complicated.
I think some valid points there. Actually, we're talking about small numbers of housing there, and just recognising we've still got hundreds of families in households. Before I go to Councillor Jones, I just want to remark, it's no surprise to any of us that we've got a big homelessness crisis right across the country. In Sheffield, if it was easy to fix, I guess someone would have fixed it by now. But what you are talking about here is this element of firefighting, and I know from experience that working in homelessness services on the front line is a very, very tough job, and there's a lot of burnout there. It's something that is a serious risk to our whole workforce. So we've got that there. This is a really solid attempt to turn it around. Got a couple of other people with questions. Councillor Norris, do you want to come in first? Sorry?
Only because mine relates to this bit. It's just I was picking up, that obviously I'm really glad that the overall strategy is going out for consultation, and we have done quite a lot of work on it beforehand. But the issues that we were picking out from the Campbell Tickell review are obviously pressing, and I was really glad to see at the bottom of page 78 that we're already implementing a recovery plan to deal with some of these issues that Councillor Turpin's highlighted as well again. But what I wondered was monitoring of that. You've got the work of doing it, and then you've got the work of checking the effects of it. There's another level, but I just wondered what we were doing on that, and what and how we're going to use that to inform what we do going forward.
So one of the things that we're doing, one of the immediate things we can see is the change on budget profile, and we have a monthly budget recovery meeting which is led by Director of Finance, Philip Gregory, where we specifically look at hostel subsidy loss, which is a good indicator of where we're at on the bed and breakfast. I monitor the use of bed and breakfast daily. It's right up there on my priorities, as you can imagine. And particularly looking at the different groups. So families is a major concern to us. Nobody should live there, but families with children just really shouldn't be in a hotel. We're also looking at the impact of these different measures. So the allocations of permanent homes to people who've been in temporary accommodation, the impact of these service improvements. So we have a whole project that's overseeing all of this work, and we've given you a summary here. We have a board, and that project is sponsored on the homes improvement. It's sponsored by Chris himself. that I chair the regular meetings of that, where we've got action plans that cover all of these different areas. So it is being managed effectively within our wider housing improvement programme. What working with Campbell Tickell has also done for us is give us a tool which is better at measuring the impact of the different prevention measures, to say, you plan to do this, what actually happened, and do that in a much more operational way, rather than waiting until the end of the quarter or the end of a year, so that you can adjust more in real time. So I think that's going to be a helpful addition. But the other thing we're absolutely doing is, which I think is a real strength of the approach, is working much more with people with lived experience about what works for them. I've now got some paid employees who have a lived experience of homelessness working with us, and that's really important that their voice is heard in everything, involving the staff, because as Douglas said, it's a tough job, but they know the job better than I do. They're doing it now. So getting that involvement from them and actually making sure we are feeding back all of the information about improvements in performance, but where we still need to develop, with our staff and other organisations, including internal partners. So on that Homeless Improvement Board, we do have representatives from all council departments. So it really is an inclusive, collaborative way of working. And then in our broader partnership, we work with the other parties who've got to help us with all of this on our Homelessness Strategy Delivery Board, who are really key, particularly where people have got those complex needs. So we've got some duties as a council, we can enable some stuff, but really if someone's got ongoing enduring needs, they need support in their local community. And again, voluntary sector are really, really important in that.
Thanks very much. Does that answer the question? Hopefully we'll approve the consultation, but it's just going to be really important to get those views in. And of course, I mean, just reflecting the fact that 3 weeks is a relatively short window for the consultation, but presumably you'll be able to really focus on getting those views where people have got something really insightful to say, using the contacts we've got. I mean, it's not just a head count, is it? So go on, respond to that.
But just to say, as well as the kind of focus, with individual groups who we feel may be underrepresented but overrepresented in services but don't have the voice, Danielle and the team and myself are attending other key forums and working with networks that we've already got. So we're having a special session with the registered housing providers, who are really important in the delivery of new homes, and providing support to people. And again, we're tabling this at our Homes Prevention Forum Delivery Board, so that people who've got a particular interest can work with us in a proactive way. So it's a very live way of consulting. It isn't just fill in a form and let us know what you think.
Thanks very much. Yeah, really important there. So any other questions, Councillor Drazik? Yes, Councillor Drazik, over to you.
Thank you. I've got a slight concern about the policy with regard to pets. So on page 150, it states that registered assistant dogs are allowed and emotional support animals in rare cases with evidence of significant health impact. So I worry that if there's a family with children fleeing domestic violence, for instance, I don't want us to unintentionally re-traumatise a family by taking their pet away from them, just to ensure that they've got a home. And similarly, people who are made homeless through no fault of their own, who have a pet who's essentially a family member, I worry that they're going to have to make a choice between giving up their family member or pet and sleeping rough. So is there any legal reason why pets have to be excluded from this policy?
Yeah, Suzanne.
Okay, so the duty is actually to provide temporary accommodation for the humans in the household, not pets. As you've rightly said, people do see that as part of their family, really important. So this policy is compliant with the legislation about what we have to do. There are some practical difficulties if we as a council choose to go beyond that and say, actually, we do recognise exactly what you've said, and we will seek to provide temporary accommodation this would be over and above the legal requirement, and I've got my legal colleague here who can advise me if I've got it wrong. It would be for us as a discretionary measure to say what we want to do over and above that. So that's the kind of legal answer, is this is the minimum we have to do. But this is the point of the consultation, I think, to say exactly what you've said. What do people think about that? Are there other factors that we need to take into account?
Thanks again. Actually, really important point to pick up, because there is that sort of crisis about people not wanting to leave dogs or whatever, and there are some organisations think that will provide that, and there are things like pet food banks as well as food banks now. It's a really important area. Also, I just want to make a point that we should probably pick this up. Things like guide dogs are not pets; they're working animals. So, welcome you picking that up. Got Councillor Baker who wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that this is a massive piece of work. Lots of information in this, and it's going out to consultation. And when it comes back, we'll probably be pulling it to pieces again. So, thank you for all the work you're doing. Good to hear you working with partners, because there's a lot of knowledge and experience out there that we need and we haven't got. Just to check that it's on the work programme at the appropriate place, so that we can deal with it when all the documentation and all the information is put together. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, yes. So I'll just go on to that. So I think it's due to come back, hopefully, to the committee in June, but we've actually said in the recommendations summer to give us a bit of leeway, because it's in the next municipal year, and I don't think committee dates have formally been set yet, and then secondly, we might get more information out of the consultation that just takes more work. So, and it makes sense to get it right rather than get it done speedily. If there's anything else you want to comment on there, Suzanne or Danielle, then do.
Yeah, I just wanted to say we're absolutely going to try and bring this back in the summer. And the reason for that is, you're right, it's really complex. Homelessness is complex, people's lives are. But we need a strategy and a policy for the council. If we adopt this, we should, of course, monitor, and we might have to review and change things over the course of the lifetime of the strategy particularly. But there is a real crisis, as you know. We've got this 6.4 million pressure on the budget, and we've got 300 households living in hotels. So we do think it's really important to adopt a strategic approach to that, in a timely way, of course, but with some urgency. But fully appreciate that there may well be lots of views that might mean we need to delay some of that and take a more phased approach to introduction of some of the measures that we've set out.
Right, thank you, yeah. So if there's no more questions, I think that takes us to the recommendations. If you look at page 76, you'll find them set out in 4 points there. Essentially is to endorse the draft temporary accommodation strategy for the purposes of the consultation, and approve putting that out to consultation, and the same with the temporary accommodation policy, which is the second document attached, and then agree that the outcome of the consultation and a final draft of the strategy and a final draft of the policy will be brought back to this committee in what we're calling summer. So hopefully June, but maybe later. So those are the recommendations. Everyone happy to endorse those? Great, okay, well, let's take that as unanimously approved. Thanks for all your work on that and all the work that we've now just committed you to do. So it's not as if it's over, is it? Thank you very much. So we're going on. So Suzanne, I think you're staying in place, aren't you? Thank you, Danielle, for your presentation there. We've now got. Can I just check? Have we got Tony? So we've got you today, Suzanne. So we'll let you explain it. So next item is a commissioning decision. Commissioning of the accommodation support for single homeless women at item 11. Again, refer people to page 183 of the pack. Suzanne, do you want to introduce the item, say what the issue is and what the decision is that the committee is being asked to make?
Yes, of course, thank you. Yeah, apologies, Tony's had to take leave today, so I'll represent the service, but it is his work. So what we're bringing forward is approval to go ahead with the commissioning process of a supported housing scheme for 11 units essentially. And there is an existing service which is delivered by Salvation Army, and that contract's due to end in September. In our needs analysis, we do need a continuation of a service of that type in the city. We've done some market engagement to see, soft market testing to see what might be possible. It is a very challenging environment to get providers to come forward and deliver for this group of people who desperately need a supported home. So what we've put forward is a recommendation that we do go ahead with that process of seeking a new provider. Our preferred option is for a scheme-based service, but being pragmatic and open to other forms of delivery if we do not get that from this process, essentially. There will, of course, be a proper process that's followed to award a contract and exit strategy from the existing provider if they don't end up being the people that are providing it going forward. And there's sufficient budget for this in our commissioning programme.
Thank you. That's nice and concise. So it's continuation of the service in some form and, of course, a vitally needed service. I know members have been briefed on this previously in the documents there. Any questions on this or comments from anyone? There is. Councillor Baker.
Just briefly, Chair, because it was quite recently the briefing and we respected it, the information. It's just that we said that there was, over the last 12 months, 25 women have used it. Is this the right size? Are we looking for something smaller, bigger, or similar to what we have at the moment? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, yes, so the 25 units, the 25 people are the individuals that have stayed in those 11 units over the course of that time. So they'll be there. So some people, it doesn't work out. They'll move on pretty quickly because sometimes it's not the right place for them. But the average stay might be about 6 months. There might be some people who move through more quickly. In terms of this particular provision for women that have got higher needs, who've experienced a lot of trauma, we don't feel we need a big scheme. That's not the appropriate setting for people, but it's part of the wider provision for supported housing that's needed. So we do need more supported housing. That completely relates to the previous item on temporary accommodation, where we will be looking at the balance between supported housing and temporary accommodation. So have we got the right configuration of supported housing overall? But on this occasion, I'm just trying to make sure we've got continuity of that particular type of service because it is going out of contract. And we've got no opportunity to extend that further, both in terms of the number of times we've had waivers on that particular contract, but also because of the situation of the current property and the provider. So there's a wider need, Penny, frankly, for supported housing for women, and that will be addressed in a broader commissioning programme.
But for this specialised bit, we're happy at this sort of size is approximately what we need.
In terms of the size of a scheme.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean there aren't other women with complex requirements who could well benefit from something of this nature. We have some other provision that does similar for younger women in the city, for example, but there's a gap. There's a gap.
Thank you. As you say, it is a very specialist area. So it's described somewhere in the recommendation on page 185. So approving the commission of supported accommodation service for single women who are homeless or at risk of rough sleeping for a maximum of up to £250,000 a year over 5 years from an external provider. So it brings in the framework of standard commissioning. So if there's no other questions, are members happy? Oh, there is another question before we go to the approvals. Yes, Councillor Turpin.
Of course, there's another question.
Of course.
So I'll just ask you a technical question first on this. Would that £250,000 is that just for the professional support, or is that include like the bed and board as well at the moment?
Okay, so we only commission through registered housing providers, where so we're assured of the quality of the property, but also that the rent is within the housing benefit scheme, and we don't incur any housing benefit loss. So the commission is for the non-eligible costs of providing support that you can't draw benefit down for. So yes, absolutely, that is about the added things that we commission to provide support.
Okay, great. That's good, because I thought it's not very much money, you know, if it's paid for everything. So the other thing I wanted to ask then is, could we, you know, you said like the preference would be for a scheme, you know, a single site. Could we incentivise that by saying we'll pay a bit more for that? And the other question is there, I mean, you kind of said it with Penny a little bit, that there's gaps. I'm not massively fond of the age restriction things, because, you know, it's just a very abrupt and arbitrary point in someone's life, and their situation could be the same as another person who's at a different point in their life, you know. So why 25, and what happens to women in that position who are over 25? If that's, sorry, I just thought I'd just get them all out this time.
Yeah. So there's lots of discussions about how you age band particular provision, but there are specific issues about younger women, or younger men indeed, being put into situations with older people who are in a different situation. So, for example, an under 25 scheme, we might also be placing our care leavers or care experienced people, and we want to make sure that people are in an appropriate setting. The group of organisations you work with who will come into your schemes and work with the customers, they're different for different age groups or people in different circumstances. So what we find is that it is better to have services for young people. It doesn't mean that older people don't require services, but it isn't about saying that we, and I'm absolutely more in favour of having more tailored approaches which look at someone holistically. So, you know, in the younger age group, we've got young parents. They won't be in the schemes for single young people, but they still need support. So I think the answer is that we actually have some provision for women over 25. This is the very specialist one. We do have other services like Housing First, where people will live in their own tenancy with lots of intensive support. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all, but what we'll be able to do is share with committee more information about our housing needs assessment, our specialist housing needs assessment, which we're in the process of finalising. Just holding off a little bit because the government's introducing the new legislation around supported housing, and that includes the requirement to do a needs assessment and have a local plan. And we do just want to check that what we have already done, which we think puts us ahead of the game, is in alignment with anything else that the government expects us to do. But I think it would be helpful to, if the committee wished that, to share more information with you about housing needs assessment, about our whole commissioning plans and our strategies around it.
Sorry, Paul, if you've got... Yeah. Did you get the second?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about that. What we've, and I'll be completely honest with you, we're in a very challenging situation financially, as you know, and the current value of this contract is about 200k, so we are uplifting it to 250. So we'll have to see what the market delivers back against that, and of course we'll have to take stock if we don't get any appropriate bids submitted, and we will completely evaluate those fairly. But what we need to be mindful of as well is giving messages that there's a lot more money available when there really isn't, before we test what is possible.
Thanks very much. Okay, good. Right, I just wonder if it would be helpful to circulate a briefing of note of the sort that you indicated and fit in with our regular briefings at some point when that's ready. So that'd be good. It's a good suggestion. Okay, so just going back to the recommendation, which I mentioned before, is everyone happy with that? Great. Okay, well, that allows you to go ahead and do that element of commissioning. So thanks very much and good luck with that. Let's hope we get someone good in there. Okay, right, we're now moving on. So item 12 is the interim asset management strategy. So swap over here. Dean, you want to come in? Again, we know who you are, but would you like to introduce yourself and your role for the benefit of everyone else watching? And then, yes, if you can give a summary of this, and obviously, again, this is something that we've discussed behind the scenes in briefings, but if you could summarise where we are with this and what the proposal is, really. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Glad you know who I am, because according to my name, I don't even know who I am either. I'm Dean Buttertham, Head of Housing Investment and Maintenance, not the Senior Voice Consultant. That was a previous life. I will try and do a very short and succinct introduction to this, because I'm sure we've got a myriad of questions, but hopefully some of this piece of work responds to some of the other questions that have been asked today. One of the challenges that we have is that, give or take a few million each year, we spend approximately 150 million on our housing stock, and that is either through revenue improvements, capital work, or new build development. Historically, we've not had an asset management strategy, so individually you'll get pieces of work around those various components and elements of how we are going to spend that money, but you've not had a framework that pulls all that work together. The change to the consumer regulations and the housing regulations changed in April 2024, and one of the challenges that we've got through the safety and quality standard, which we've attached as appendices to report, basically sets out how we are going to use our intelligence that we have collected through stock condition surveys and other pieces of work that we're doing to make sure that we can maintain, improve and develop the housing stock, primarily making sure that our residents remain safe, we understand the needs of our tenants, but also crucially that whatever we are proposing is financially viable. This interim asset management strategy will set out a framework for us to follow in 2025-26 and sets very clearly some of the key challenges that Sheffield City Council faces in understanding the investment requirements of its stock, both in relation to how we invest, how we divest, and also potentially how we make some difficult decisions in relation to potentially demolishing and re-providing some of the stock that we've got. The capital programme for 25-26 has already been approved, so this isn't recommending any changes to what we're actually spending in the coming financial year. But what it is doing is it's identified, if you look at page 212 of your pack, a series of annexes that we have to work on within the next 12 months. And the proposal is to use this framework within this interim asset management strategy to table a final asset management strategy in March 2026 that pulls together the various elements of where we spend the monies that we've got. So Paul, in relation to a previous question there in relation to shared ownership, what we want to be able to do is present a holistic investment plan, both 5 years and a 30-year financial management strategy that says, what's the investment requirement of our stock? How much money actually have we got available? Is there a gap in relation to the investment and the money that we have available? And if we have a gap, where do we have to spend the money in relation to regulation and legal requirements? Some of that is shifting and some of it is changing over time. So you recognise that post-Grenfell, a lot more building safety regulation, Fire Safety Act has come into play, and there's a requirement to spend some monies. There's also other agendas running parallel to that, and we've also mentioned decarbonisation and net zero here today in relation to what's our ambition in relation to bringing our stock up to a SAP-C rating and making sure that we're delivering those objectives. So the recommendation is to approve the interim asset management strategy. But part of what we want to do is that we're going to bring the net zero action plan to the April committee, but as part of that, and one of the appendices there will be, is setting a framework for full stakeholder engagement during 25-26, both with members but also identifying who the other key stakeholders are and a timetable of engagement, so we can make sure that when we're pulling together the Equalities Impact Assessment that we've included everybody that we need to include, we understand everybody's views on it, and we can table a very robust report in March 26. So, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much. Again, it covers a huge area of work here, and of course a huge housing stock. So I'm just looking for any questions on this too, Dean. Go on there. So, Councillor Chaplin.
There you are, Councillor Turpin. I've managed to be the first one on this report. No, thank you, Dean, for this report. There is clearly going to be a huge amount of work, and it shouldn't be underestimated that we've got housing stock, both that's diverse housing stock that's grown up from being within Sheffield City, but also over the years as the city has expanded, it's taken in from the Wortley, the old Wortley District Council in the 70s, I think, and also from Derbyshire, also in the 1974 reorganisation. So there's just so much that is is different across all of the housing stock that we have. So I don't think members should underestimate the scale of the job that's in hand, and I'm not going to try and pin you down on that, because I think we need to let you get on and do the job. But something that did come up as a concern for tenants at the forum we had before the meeting was over the gas surveys, and so I suppose I'm referencing this against page 217 in relation to health and safety. I think in terms of getting towards net zero, we want to remove as much gas supply as possible, but obviously make sure that whatever we get, the renewable fuels, it's not fuels, that the renewable energy that we do use in future will well, be up to the job, basically. But it did come up from some of the questions that were put to us, that different contractors seem to apply a different approach to their gas surveys. So some will actually look at the gas cookers and make some assessment of them, and others don't. So I hope that will be picked up as you go through with the conditions, and that the quality of appliances will be looked at, as well as the source of the supply into the houses. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to pick up, so a really important point you made about reflecting what the tenants told us at the Tenant Voices Matter meeting, something that we hadn't clocked, I think, straight away. I think it's also particularly in relation to the gas safety policy, which is the next item on, well, last item on here.
Yes, I didn't mean to reference that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's worth flagging it up. Dean, do you want to respond to the rest of what Mike was saying?
Thank you, Chair. One of the key drivers that we are looking at is how do we provide assurance that the services that we're delivering are actually delivering the regulatory requirements that we have. So we have a mix of internal and external suppliers and contractors. What we want to be able to do is make sure that we have a percentage of quality control that sits behind that. So even if it's our internal repairs and maintenance service, how do we make sure we've got a framework in place that, say, tests 10% of the work that they're doing, so it meets the requirement that we are supposed to deliver? That applies to both internal and external contractors. That's a piece of work that we're taking forward now in relation to the new contractors, so the electrical contractors that we've just recently appointed, £20 million piece of work over the next 10 years. We are sampling 10% of their work. The stock condition surveys that we're undertaking across all of our stock for the next 2 years will be quality checking 10% of their work. So hopefully, through that quality check, everything will be working as it is, but it gives us an opportunity then to reset ourselves and have appropriate performance delivery conversations with contractors where they're not performing to bring those contracts back up to standard.
Thanks very much. You want to come back on that, Councillor Chapman?
I would just like to thank Dean for the work being done on electrical supply and electrical sockets, because that's currently going on the Scraithwood estate, which is in my ward, and I'm sure the tenants will be very appreciative to have modern electrical fittings and sockets around their properties.
Thank you. Yeah, really important point. And of course, you also mentioned decarbonisation, and what's important is that's in there as something that's fundamental, really, to all the asset management work that goes on. And fundamentally, it's not just about saving the planet through reducing carbon emissions. It's about making homes warm, safe, and affordable to heat, which is pretty fundamental right across all our council homes. So, any other questions on that? I mean, it is an interim strategy, isn't it? So, I mean, we've got the two things set out at the recommendation on page 209. So today the question is about, I'll come to you in a moment, it's about approving the interim asset management strategy and then noting the development of the substantive full asset management strategy to come back in a year's time. I'll take questions from, Councillor Norris first, as you haven't spoken for a bit.
It's not so much a question as a comment, but that this is overdue, isn't it? And it's really important that we're getting this information, because we are balancing some really difficult challenges. You've just clearly said, Douglas, why decarbonisation is important, and it's really good that we're looking at it as part of the ongoing work, not as a separate thing. But we've also got the health and safety. We're also working in an environment that we're trying to improve, but has not given us in the past 14 or 15 years the resource we need to do the work that we have in front of us. So I just want to welcome it, and as the first step on a journey that will allow us to be much more efficient and focused in the way that we apply the resource that we've got, because there's no matter what the size of the challenge, it goes quicker if you start.
No, it's a fair point. So it's a comment rather than a question, and a good one. I'll take Councillor Turpin next, then Dean, if you want to come back on either or both of those.
Thanks. I welcome it as well. It is really positive and something that we really need, and I'm really happy about that we have this interim policy to really have time to digest what it is and what it means, and which so you know we'll really be able to dive into it when we come to it, what's the not interim policy, the policy after the interim next year. You know, I'm looking forward to getting into this. I was going to ask you just on that really specific point about the shared ownership thing. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think that policy was developed under the late great Paul Wood as a reaction to the right to buy, because it was you know we were spending a lot of money on new houses and then losing them a few years later, and it was a strategy to deal with that. But with the new right to buy policy, I think that landscape has changed, and so maybe I should have mentioned this when we were about the work plan. But I was thinking the other day, I've been having some conversations with officers that we really need to review that shared ownership policy. And actually, I was wondering, would that be something that would be reviewed? You know, does that sit under or within an asset management policy or separate? I'm just asking really what you for your guidance on. Would that be something we would look at in this? Because there's also mention of it in the allocations policy, which I know this is not an item, but we're also beginning work on. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are it absolutely forms part of an asset management strategy, because the shared ownership is covered as part of the stock increase programme, the holistic stock increase programme, which is tabled and was approved by Strategy and Resources in relation to what we are going to build and the amount of money that we are setting aside to do that. That will change over time because what we'll be doing is significant demand analysis that says what's the changing market both in relation to social housing, affordable housing, but also shared ownership that we want to build. And some of the difficult challenges and questions that we'll probably be posing as part of the workshop sessions in the lead up to the substantive asset management strategy is it's the balance between new build properties and investment in existing stock, and how we mix and match that both to make sure that we are building sufficient new properties, but also making sure that our focus remains on the people who are living in existing council housing. So absolutely, the shared ownership fits within there. And it's a piece of work that I'll take forward with our growth team in relation to that. And part of the future work programme, we might want to come back here to have a further conversation.
Yes, let me bring in Chris too, as director.
And you made me muse and think, Councillor Turpin, about the shared ownership policy in general. I think Dean's answer and my answer aren't going to conflict with each other, but there have been changes in requirements and obligations to social housing landlords in terms of shared ownership. So I'm pretty certain the policy probably does need a review. So thank you for flagging that. We'll put that on the timetable.
I think that's very important, yeah. So let's find a way to take that away and find out what needs to be done to review that. Also where it fits, because of course housing growth isn't wholly in this committee. Okay, job to do, I think without formally resolving it. Councillor Jones, you've got a question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Dean, even if you've got the wrong title on your card. And Chris, some of the answers there. I'm always... At this point, I'm always kind of torn between the decision about how we're spending rent payers' money, because I'm guessing that's what we're doing effectively. And it's always that bit about what our ambitions are and what we perceive as being the right ambitions, because obviously there's stuff we must do, as set by legislation, and stuff we want to do, because we think that's right. Part of that's part of the stock increase programme and everything else, because we think that's right. But are we making sure that the way that rent payers' money is spent is appropriate? Is that growth team focused on the fact that this is rent payers' money? Because part of it is yes, we do get to increase the amount of houses we've got. We do then increase the amount of rent we're coming in. But sometimes we're borrowing against our revenue stream already, and that puts a burden on there, and that can potentially take money out of what we can spend on for existing tenants. How do you temper ambition with desire in that element there? How have we got the balance right? Are we working right within that and understanding that our existing tenants need a greater focus than maybe future tenants? Where do you feel on that?
One of the challenges we've got is understanding the stock that we've currently got. And one of the pieces of work that we've commissioned is to get us to a point whereby we've got 100% stock condition surveys for all of our properties, and then renew that every 5 years. So we've always got up-to-date data on what is happening within our stock. That gives us a valuable suite of information then that allows us to tell us where the key challenges are across the city. They're not going to be in the same place. They're not going to be in the same kind of archetype of property. They will be in different stock levels. In some respects, without that level of data, it's very difficult to say where is the key priority in relation to where we need to spend the resource. So within the report that you've got there, it sets out kind of a pecking order in relation to what we need to deliver. And some of that is around, we've got a regulative requirement that says building safety, fire safety has to take priority. You have to spend the money on that stock. One of the challenges that we've got, and this is very hypothetical, is if we've got 50 million to spend a year and it's going to cost 50 million to spend on the regulatory work, there's no other conversation to have because we have to have that. Hopefully we will not be in that position. We'll be in a position where we can have kind of a balanced scorecard approach to investment. But that, again, comes back to a change in landscape. So if you think over the last 2 to 3 years, we've had our ABSA conversation that says we will be looking at different elements of damp and mould within our property. We'll be looking at how we resolve disrepair cases. Where do we need to invest the resources that we've got? But then there's also the requirements that sit within the HRA business plan that say to actually fund some of the work on the existing stock, we still need to pull in income to fund that. some of the changes to the right to buy legislation means that we're actually going, over the next 10 years, we probably won't lose more stock than we anticipated, but over the next 2 years, we'll have a spike in terms of some of the properties that we will have sold. So it's that balance between how do we keep the income coming into the HRA for us to have the money to spend the resources, but then having the data and the analysis to make sure that we fully understand where we're spending and the options that we're placing in front of members to make decisions.
Thanks very much. I'll bring in the Director of Housing and then see if we can move on to the next items.
Yeah, I'll be brief, Chair. Yeah, again, you've hit the nail on the head there. One I can answer and one no one can answer. So the bit I can answer is how do we spend our money and what is it on in terms of future investment in people's homes is we do that as part of the engagement in the consultation with the customers and the residents. What are your priorities? If you had a choice of this, that and the other, which would you prefer? If the standard of kitchen we use was this, we could do 2,000. If the standard of the kitchen was this, we could do 1,500. Which do you think? That sort of question. How do you balance the pressures of existing tenants against new tenants is a question that nobody can quite answer yet. And in a political environment where everyone's been asked to build more social housing, but also ensure that safety of their existing housing. There isn't enough money at the moment, full stop, but there will have to be a different answer somewhere along the line.
Yes.
As part of that bit, which is kind of where I always fear it is there's not enough money, as always. Within the interim policy, is there enough invested in the team to find potential grants and other revenue streams to maximise what we can bring in to do that? Do we feel that we've got that right so we can take the pressure off rent payers and maybe pass it up to central government and others that could help?
Yes, as part of the asset management team and other teams that I manage, we have teams who will be looking for that external grant funding. So if I use decarbonisation as the example, we've been very successful historically in terms of social housing decarbonisation fund to be able to do that. But still, there is a gap in relation to that. And we've had the conversation when we presented the net zero route map here, probably about a year ago, saying where is the gap in relation to, if we wanted to bring all of our properties up to a net zero standard, to where they currently are, there's a £2 billion shortfall. We can team and ladle within the HRA into some element in relation to trying some things, but we can't find £2 billion out of our back pocket to pay for that. So some of the things that we'll need to be doing as the local authorities, how do we use our lobbying powers to basically say, look, there is an issue here. This is still a national strategy and a national policy. For us as Sheffield City Council to meet that, there needs to be a different solution to that over and above what we can self-fund.
Thanks, yeah. Risk of prolonging this, Councillor Norris, do go in.
I'll try and be quick. Just that Tom Hunt took part as the leader of Sheffield in the latest Securing the Future of Council Housing conference, and that's proposing a new green and decent home standard that comes with relief of burden, i.e. it's a set of recommendations that comes with funding to support implementing the recommendations. So I think that lobbying work is going on, and that's an alliance of over 100 councils, so we are not alone in this situation.
Thanks. I was going to make a similar point, but also point out, I was also at that Future of Council Housing conference and running workshop there. But actually, it's a really important point because it recognises that governments for many decades have underfunded council housing and have simply failed to recognise it's a really, really important public service. And there is growing pressure on government to get them to accept that actually the national government needs to make sure that council housing is funded. When you think about how many people we house directly, it's a really, really important thing, and that awareness has got to grow. What's good about this campaign is there is now an organised caucus of local authorities that have not sold off their housing, have retained it, manage it, see it as a public service, and really want to make that work. And there's a lot of things that the government can do, not only with putting money into it, but the government does need to face up to the fact that it does need to put more money into council housing over the medium and long term. and the short term. And that campaign is growing. So I mean, I think we ought to wish it every success. It's something that Sheffield City Council is fully signed up to as one of the biggest local authority landlords in the country. So it is worth saying that now. Anyway, that is our that's our political soapbox, isn't it, councillors? So in the here and now, the bit of work that Dean and his team have to do, are we happy to approve the recommendations I noted before, page 209? Right, thank you very much. That's great. That's a really important piece of work. So we move on to the last two items. We've got the fire safety policy for social housing, and then following that, the gas servicing policy. But Luke, if you want to come up to the table, that's great. So now on item 13, moving to page 259 of the agendas. So again, we've got a policy here. Luke, welcome to, I think it's your first committee meeting in person. You've received a lot of comments from us councillors on early drafts of the policy, and you've now revised what you bring forward. Shall I hand over to you? So I assume we've read the policy in its final version, but do summarise it with the headlines, and then we can open up to questions.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Luke Simpson, and I am the Service Manager for Housing Fire Safety. So what we're bringing to the committee today is the new proposal for the social housing fire safety policy. We feel this brings a significant step forward for the building and resident safety of our residents in high-rise, low-rise and medium-rise. It gives us a transparent approach to the organisational arrangements, the commitment in terms of what we're going to do in terms of managing the safety of our residents. It clearly sets out our key roles and responsibilities as a local authority and a landlord on what we should be doing. So it's transparent for our residents to kind of hold us accountable. It aligns with legal requirements. So we do know we've got to comply with certain key legal legislation. That's the Building Safety Act and also the Fire Safety Act and the Regulatory Fire Reform Act. So what's important to note today that this is just the policy. This isn't the management plan. So this won't go into the procedural, operational from an officer's perspective. It's setting out the key objectives as a local authority on how we will manage fire safety in its principle. Again, important to note, this policy is just for social housing. So we've got other organisational arrangements and policies that will address fire safety across the estate, so things like the corporate buildings. So our policy doesn't consider this because there's already policies in existence. We've done a wide range of stakeholder engagement, some with South Yorkshire Fire, some with experts within the field, such as Bailey Garner, and we kind of feel that this is now in a shareable format where we can kind of go live. The reason, so why do we need this policy? So prior to the position now, we've been utilising the corporate policy. There's changes in organisational landscape, there's changes in regulations, there's changes in the environment and kind of where we're finding ourselves post-Grenfell. So we kind of feel what we need to do is strengthen the existing policy and build a clear scope for social housing. And the recommendation is we need a unique policy to do that. Again, I think it's anticipated will bring greater transparency and accountability to us, and that's not just from our residents, that's also from a regulatory compliance aspect as well. It gives us a clear way to kind of illustrate our commitment. We've tried to write the policy in a way that's easy to understand, so legislation can be quite complex. So we've taken that on board, and we've written this in a way that is simple for residents to understand, whilst also capturing the legal jargon, if you like. But we've done that in a way which it makes it really clear and simple. The policy considers a range of different safety aspects. There's our legal obligations in there. So that's the legislation and laws we must comply with. It focuses on resident safety. So when I say residents, it's not just our tenants, it's the leaseholders that's within our buildings. It's also the visitors and also staff working at those sites. We're looking to reduce the risks of fire and have adequate mitigation in place to address resident safety. we're looking to kind of be really clear on our accountability and a clear guideline for stakeholders and residents. And then I suppose lastly it's the regulatory scrutiny. So it's there to kind of evidence the compliance aspects and also satisfy South Yorkshire Fire in terms of enforcement, that actually we've got the right controls in place at the right level, and that actually we are aware as an organisation on the actions we need to take to keep people safe. Key benefits are what the policy will bring is overall improved fire safety. So what we're trying to do here is mitigate fire risk, and having a clearly defined social housing policy will help us do that. It gives us a clear framework to operate from as an organisation, and that will set our legal and statutory obligations. It will allow us to better engage with residents because we'll understand what our obligations are and what to expect from us as their landlord. It'll help give us a stronger oversight, so we'll be able to ensure the safety standards that we implement over and above, as well as statutory duty. And then I suppose potentially there's a cost saving aspect. So what we're trying to do here is take a proactive approach to fire safety. So what we don't want to do is keep taking a reactive approach. So if we've got that proactive approach, hopefully there'll be some remedial costs and liabilities we can reduce by taking that stance. I think what that means is overall staff will have a clear understanding, residents will be able to hold us accountable, leaders will have confidence that we're proactively managing fire safety, and we'll have regulatory assurance. So the regulators, building safety, South Yorkshire Fire or social regulator will all have the assurance that actually we've got the framework in place to deliver a robust fire safety model. And with that said, I'm happy to hand over for questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It might surprise people to know that we didn't have a fire safety policy before. But thanks for drawing attention to the fact that it's a very different regulatory landscape post Grenfell, and obviously safety of all our tenants in these circumstances is really important. We've got the policy in front of us. I mean, do we have any questions? Because obviously we have asked a lot of questions before about this. We do. We have one from Councillor Chaplin.
It's not so much a question, but more to direct some travel, really. Yes, it was a shock to us all that we didn't actually have a fire safety policy. So very pleased that you've been able to bring one to us here today, Luke. And it might partly explain why probably about 2.5 years ago there was an elderly male tenant in a I think it was a 2-bed semi, it might have been a 3-bed semi, but he was a smoker and he fell asleep and he died of smoke inhalation, and obviously the fire brigade were called, but there was a lot of damage done to the property. Sadly the man died, but it might be something worth exploring is the number of tenants, particularly older tenants that we have in properties, and making sure that we've got the appropriate fire alarms in place so that kind of incident doesn't get out of control. But that's really for future reference. But I totally welcome this policy and hope that it will provide a good framework to progress the work that needs to be done on this. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Can I bring Councillor Baker at this point?
Very, very quickly, just to say to Councillor Chapman, if you know of an elderly person who's in a property and you're not sure whether they've got a fire alarm, etc., if you contact, obviously advise them, but if they contact the fire brigade, they will go and do it. They'll fit the alarms and sort it out. Also, if you know somebody in a private accommodation as well as rented, it's not only our properties. If you have someone who you know is a hoarder who's wanting some help, they will go in there as well and help. And it's a useful service that they sort of do one afternoon a week, sort of thing. So it is custom and practice, so it's worth knowing. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks. It's that practical comment there.
Can I add my thanks to Penny? I just wonder, and Chris might be in a better position to answer this, whether our neighbourhood housing officers pick up on these things when they now, because they're doing annual visits, so hopefully they will also be picking up on this and helping with the overall policy.
Yes, I was going to bring in Dean and or Chris, but Dean, yeah, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in relation to smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors, we've got those fitted throughout our stock. What tends to happen over a period of time is some of them disappear. And what we've got to do is, through our inspection regime, make sure that we are picking those up. So it comes back to the question about decency, previously, the previous question. So a good majority of the Category 1 HHSRS reports that we've had that will push a property out of decency says that a property's not got a smoke alarm or a carbon monoxide detector in place, and we will fit that immediately to make sure that that is in place. One of the things that we do, and we're quite proud of this, is that we work very closely with the South Yorkshire Fire and Rescue, and we've got a budget in place. So where we do a joint risk assessment and identify a customer who's vulnerable and requires an intervention, we can put a variety of solutions in place. And one of those solutions that we can put in place is actually install a sprinkler system or a misting system into people's properties, so that if we understand that they have a particular challenge, but we need to mitigate that, there are various things that we can do. Yes, our neighbourhood officers will go and visit individuals and they will identify customers who've got a vulnerability, and they will passport them on to us and other agencies so we can identify what the appropriate intervention is.
Great, thanks very much. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm glad that we're bringing this policy forward, and I'm kind of mindful of what Mike was saying. I guess a lot of the stuff is covered in 7.2 in terms of how we support tenants to be safe. And there's non-competence, compliance and escalation bit on here. I'm not quite sure what that kind of looks like, because the one thing I was thinking when I was looking at this policy was there's an advert doing the rounds at the moment on the radio, and I'm not sure whether it's on TV or anything. It's about did you turn that charger off? Are you doing all you can do as someone living within a property to minimise your risk to causing fires inadvertently? And I'm not sure whether the non-compliance and escalation bit is. I'm kind of mindful of a certain footballer of a team that I support and decided to let fireworks off in his bathroom some years back. What do we do about those elements there where people are being reckless or idiotic or stupid otherwise? I'm sure it's the minority of the times that fire risks do come out from incidents like that, but is that covered by Part 12, non-compliance and escalation bit of when we're monitoring what tenants are doing, not just to help them keep safe, but to protect them from themselves at times?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really hard to try and mitigate against people's behaviours. I mean, what we're keen on doing is we'll have a resident engagement strategy, and we'll work with South Yorkshire Fire on how we kind of deliver educational pieces to our residents and tenants. I think it's around being clear on the right behaviours. So it's educating them to a level where they understand the fire risks. I think where we've got genuine concerns, we kind of refer to as tenancy management and tenancy conditions of the property. So if they're actually in clear breach, we've got duties under the Building Safety Act, the Fire Safety Act, to kind of take measures against those individuals. But I think the key message here is kind of that engagement before and letting people actually understand and bring fire safety to the forefront. And I think we are having a proactive push at the moment. We've recently issued some smoke alarm guidances at our high-rise. So I think it's around giving the right messages and the right behaviours and encouraging people to kind of report and let us know if there's any issues.
Thank you. I guess a follow-on from that is kind of, I think Chris, you alluded to it earlier, I may be wrong, kind of like, might have been another officer, I'm sorry if I forget. Sometimes we try and do too much for tenants. What happens if we know people well? So if the electrical, if the smoke detectors are hardwired in, you don't have a battery and they don't start beeping, and then people don't take the battery out and then disable the fire alarm. Is this the kind of steps we're going towards? And if we do find that someone has put a glove over a smoke detector, what would we then do? If we suddenly discovered that, what would we do as our next step to say, hold on, we're doing all we can to keep you safe, but you're deliberately going out of your way to prevent us helping you? What do we then do then? Because there is that balance between us doing too much for people and making sure people are doing what's right for themselves and their neighbours effectively on that place.
There's a variety of things there, and committee will note last year that you approved the changes to the tenancy conditions at that particular time. They're going to come in force in April of this year. So we've given ourselves more powers in relation to taking enforcement action on that. But we're in a changing environment, and what we've got to be able to do is understand that changing environment. And whilst I will say this, because I know we'll get supplementary questions here, we know we've had questions about mobility scooters, e-scooters, e-bikes, storage and charging of batteries, which I'm sure each Christmas every household gets more of these vehicles in their house, and what we've got to do is understand what that means for us and make sure that we're pushing out the right guidance, understanding what that means for us, how we then changing our own internal regulations about how we identify and how we manage those. So this is not a standstill piece of work. It's how's the environment changing on a daily and a weekly basis. And if we've got to do something, we can't automatically always go back and change the conditions of the tenancy. Some of it is around how we're pushing that information out, how we are identifying vulnerable customers, customers who potentially are just flagrantly not following the conditions of tenancy. And if we have to take robust action, we have to be very clear in our policies and the management plans that sit at the back of that we will be very robust in taking that appropriate action.
Thanks very much. I'm glad you mentioned the electric scooter issue, because it was something this committee identified as something that needs to be brought in somewhere. And Luke, you've already said there's going to be ongoing work to develop the fire management plan, so we're certainly not at the end of the line. But I think we are at the point where we can hopefully approve this policy. If there's no other burning questions on this, then let's have a look at the recommendation on 261, page 261. Is simply to approve the policy that we've got in front of us, but to grant it delegated authority to the Executive Director to make any minor amendments and updates as required to reflect organisational legislative changes. And at some point there'll be provision to review this policy in front of the committee. Is everyone happy with that recommendation? Getting nods there. Let's take that as approved. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for attending, Luke. And then we'll move on to the final one. So, Dean, don't go away yet. Gas servicing policy. So, some similar themes there here. Dean, over to you, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll try and be as succinct as I can. As I say, having a robust set of compliance policies is one of the key components that we've been picking up as part of the regulatory changes that came in April 24. Again, committee, if you cast your mind back 18 months ago, we brought the gas safety policy then for approval. So we've got a gas safety policy in place. But some of the work that we've been doing with the Housing Quality Network and the regulator of social housing is understanding how we can actually firm up some of the elements that sit within our policy documents. And what you'll see over the coming months is more compliance policies coming to you for approval, so that we've got a full suite of compliance documents in place. One, to give you the assurance that we've got those documents in place, but also for the regulator of social housing and other regulators that we are working with. The key inclusion within this particular document is the past document was purely a gas document. This time we've included carbon monoxide because they work in tandem, hand in hand. Where we've got gas, we've got to have carbon monoxide. Therefore, that covers that. But we've also included within this document an element of solid fuel appliances that we have. We only have about 30 across the city, but those solid fuel fires potentially have cause to kick off quite a few emissions. So we need to make sure that we've got a robust process in place to test them on an annual basis and have the appropriate safety certificates in place. Again, what I want to give assurance to the committee is, as part of this, is One, we have a zero tolerance approach in relation to making sure that we are compliant, but we recognise through the equalities impact that we have some of the challenges from some of our residents in terms of how we get in. So we're very clear in we will work with a wide range of stakeholders, both within the council and external, so where we have access issues, we can maximise those opportunities to make sure that we are, and as Chris alluded to earlier, our ambition is to be 100% compliant in this area, but demonstrate very clearly to our regulators that we've done everything in a timely manner that we can to make sure that the rest of our residents are as safe as they can be in their homes. I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Sorry, me turning you off there. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. But yeah, just saying thanks for that. It's some of the members of the committee will know we've all had some input too. Any questions on that, or shall we go straight to approval? Councillor Turpin.
I mean, sorry, I know. No, does this policy strengthen our ability to get into people's homes when they haven't got a in-date gas safety certificate?
The way that we can get into people's homes in the first instance is having a robust dialogue with those individuals. One, having a plan in place to make sure we've got a gas servicing process in place, and then having a clear process of escalation to make sure that we can get in. For individuals who can't let us in or won't let us in, there's potentially different solutions to that. Access to those properties is set down in legislation and also set out within our conditions of tenancy. So the work that we've been doing with our legal colleagues is making sure we've got robust service level agreements in place so that when we've exhausted our, let's say, our normal attempts to access a property, that we then pursue the correct legal action within the right timescales to make that happen. So there's legislation there to make that happen. The best way for us to get into the properties and to understand that is understand through historic access. So we know potentially in the past people have not let us in, so we should flag those up in relation to we can start that work early within the process. Make sure that is concluded, but be as efficient as we can be in making sure that we're escalating something from one side to the other procedurally, so that we can be escalated to legal where we need to do.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, worth just pointing out that it says in 7.7, it is a requirement of the tenancy agreement that access is given to carry out gas safety inspections. It's a really important starting point. Councillor Jones. Councillor Norris.
Not a question, just to let everybody know that I've got a long journey to do and I'm going to have to go in the next 5 minutes, and I'm hoping we'll be finished then, but if other people have other questions, then obviously they need to ask them.
We might have finished already. Have you actually got a question?
Very, very briefly,
yeah,
to try not keep Councillor Norris here. Obviously, when COVID pandemic hit, we failed. We couldn't do inspections because of getting into properties and such like. With regards to this policy, and you may have addressed it elsewhere, and I might just have missed it, but what lessons have we learned, and how would we do things differently now to make sure that we do gain access to those houses, even under very trying and difficult circumstances?
Thank you. I think the COVID situation was a unique set of situations that we were faced with, and we've learned quite a lot nationally and organisationally in relation to doing that. We as Sheffield City Council took the strategic decision that we wouldn't carry on with the gas servicing programme during that period. Some other organisations decided to carry on with their gas servicing programme at that particular time. What we've got to be able to reconcile with the regulator of social housing is giving them the reassurance that we understand the issues, that we've got a process in place, that we will be making sure that we follow the due process. I'm sure the engagement in those situations, if it happens again, is we'll have a much earlier conversation with the regulator of social housing as a sector that says these are the challenges that we are facing in the sector. How are we going to address those based on the particular situation? As I say, COVID was an interesting and a challenging situation, and some of the decisions we've made, if we had that situation again with the knowledge that we've learned, we might have done something different.
Thanks very much. That's great. Shall we just look at the recommendation on page 291 and see if we get nods to approve the policy that's in front of us? If we've got nods, so we'll take that as approved unanimously. Thank you very much to everyone who's still in the room. That's the end of the meeting. Remember, we have got a meeting in April this year, 24th of April. It should be in your calendars now. So plenty more to do. We've gone through 5 new policies and strategies that we've now approved today, so that is good, all part of the ongoing process of improving the standard of housing across the city. Thanks very much, everyone.